All right, welcome everybody to our AMA with Professor Faridah Pawan, who teaches at Indiana University and is also the facilitator of the TESOL International Teacher Educator Interest section. Did I get all of those titles correct?
Yes.
Fantastic. So I'm curious, Faridah, what brought you to the field of education in the first place?
Um, I'm a Malaysian by birth, and one of the things that happens is a multilingual country, is a multi-ethnic country, and we're always crossing bridges, making sense making as part of what we do through language. And I think I got very curious about the role of languages in my life, and literacy in my life, and that's why I moved into the profession of language teacher education. But in terms of education in general, I think one of the things about uh, being a teacher at the university level is that you're in a profession that's at the forefront of change, and I think when I started, one of the things that I was very aware of was that the lack of ESL teachers in Indiana, whereby there was like one teacher to 80 ELs, English language learners. It was a very harrowing situation. I think to some extent it still is. And then I was also in the midst of, when the Olympics was happening, the 2008 Olympics, when the Olympics was happening, there was a sudden 500% increase in the number of demands for EFL teachers abroad. And then now with the pandemic is this online teaching. And so I think I'm giving you those examples because you can kind of see that the profession allows you to be right there, right where it's happening. It causes you a lot of consternation, but at the same time, it creates a great deal of opportunity for you to try to make a difference in the way that you can, as small as it is, but that you can situate it, you situate your work in what's happening at the time that you are engaged in the profession. So I think that's where it is.
That's interesting. Can you elaborate a little bit on your work and the way it has kind of adapted not only to changes around you, but also had an impact on the world? I know since you have done a lot of work in teacher education and teacher training, I can only imagine that your work has kind of an expanding effect, even more so than some teachers might.
Well, you give me too much credit there. I think we don't know our impact, but I think we understand the need. And so I think the way I've addressed my job is to essentially, as I was saying, have an understanding of where the need is in the context that I'm working. And so with the ESL situation, when I started, in contrast to I think other the ways that normally assistant professors would start, is I started with acquiring or applying for grants that supported teacher professional development in ESL, and in terms of their collaboration with content area teachers. And the only way that we could increase the number of ESL teachers in Indiana is that if we could also involve content area teachers. And then NCLB, No Child Left Behind, was in that, at that point in time, that we need to do ESL to do. And so in essence, it's finding opportunities to address the need. The federal government at that point in time, had a lot of grants to support English language learners, and that coincided with what I saw the need was in Indiana. So in a sense, I think as an academic, and especially in the School of Education, your job is to attempt to see what the needs are and to find ways to address that. And for me, at the beginning of my career, is identifying funding so that we could support the important work of developing and increasing the numbers of qualified ESL teachers in along with content area teachers. And then um, and I could expand that some more, but I don't want to go on. But that's the way it is. I think that's the way that I've always operated, is to understand the needs, to pay attention to where it is, and so reading, listening to what, media, engaging with students, all of that feed into the profession. And so again, going back to the idea that you're at the forefront of change because you are with stakeholders, that are immersed in the challenges of the day. And so that's where it is.
Wow.
Kind
That's
of gone beyond your question, but
no, that's actually quite an inspiring answer. It's very motivational, I think, for teachers to think of their roles that way, and professors especially. So, can you tell us a little bit about what it's like working in academia in the United States?
for me, I think working in academia in the United States, well, I think one of the things about working, I think we've talked about this once before, which is the idea of autonomy is something that I think academics in the US and elsewhere, I think, value. In this context that I work in, autonomy is a huge opportunity, but it's also a responsibility in a sense that autonomy is not given to you. You have to kind of create a situation whereby you have autonomy, and the ability to do so, I think, is what's special. That you can create that space for you to explore, to create programs, to create courses that you want to teach, to engage with, I think, different kinds of research that you and your students are interested in. And so it's not so much, well, I think for me anyway, I can't speak for other people, but for me, it's not a hierarchical pursuit in this job. It's more a job whereby you identify areas whereby you could feel most generative, that you can feel the most passion with, that you feel pushed to move forward. But it is, autonomy has a price, in the sense that I think, I've not been to a coffee shop in about 5 years, because it's like your own, it's like your own, business. Although in a sense that, there's more free time, and not free time, there's more flexibility in time. You feel the time that you have with the work that you need to do. So in essence, you ask me, this is the weekend, right? I'm here in the office because there's something I need to do, but I sense that fire coming in from within. I have that autonomy, but with that autonomy comes a huge responsibility. Definitely, you have to find funding projects. You have to develop courses that, there's no infrastructure for. You have to develop programs whereby you have to create infrastructure. And this is where we love graduate students, because we can't live without without everyone being here engaging with us, feeding ideas. And it's a two-way process. We engage. It's not, it's we live off of each other's energies and mental trips and juices that we create for each other. I think that's the best in academia. I'm not saying I'm creating a very ideal world here, but what I'm saying also is that with that autonomy comes a huge responsibility. Now, for example, when last 2 years ago, I wrote 8 grants.
Oh, wow.
Each one take 2 to 3 months. I got funded only for one. Huge amount of responsibility. And on top of that, you have to do research, you have to teach, you have to do service, you have to do all of that, and you have to have a life at the same time. So that autonomy is not 9 to 5. It consumes you, but you have that opportunity to create that space.
And is that true at all levels of faculty? Like if somebody were to move from Korea after teaching in Korea for a long time, were to move back to the United States and kind of eyeing positions in academia in the United States, I assume we couldn't expect that kind of autonomy right off the bat, but where could we maybe expect to start, and how would we go about working our way up to expanding our responsibility and our autonomy?
Well, in a sense, I'm talking about Indiana University. Indiana University is a research one university, so there is an expectation, of research, um, and funded research. But so you have to kind of contextualize where you want your academic world to be, and because there are different types of university, tertiary institutions in the U.S. and Indiana University is this one type. And so in terms of going back to your question as to how do you creating that autonomy, you know, different ways to do it. But the way I started was to find, you know, start with finding funding, small funding, and their internal funding. Your university usually has a lot of funding programs. It's small, but that's okay because each funding gives you, right, steps to create your own thing,
Mhm.
right? And then those small steps can lead to bigger projects, bigger opportunities, and bigger, foundations for you to apply for larger grants. So that's why the funding system, the internal grants and the external grant system is in place in institutions such as Indiana University is to kind of give stepping stones, for faculty to create that space, and so it, but like everything else, it's a negotiated space. And so, but that's one step that I know of. But I know other people have different ways of, approaching the autonomy and developing that space for themselves. But the other thing about, I think, working in an institution like Indiana University is that you can create your own courses and therefore a good sense of what you bring to the profession, and it's very important because you will have the opportunity to create new courses, courses that reflect your expertise, your knowledge. But as you go into that institution, understand where your fit is so that you can make that argument. This is my niche, and
Mhm.
thus, therefore, I'm going to create these courses, right? And the other is also service. You have choices, right, as to where what you want to do, right, as a faculty member, how you choose to contribute. And so that's another autonomous space. And I think the last thing I will say is that one of the things that I've, this profession can be quite zany because you can go in multiple ways. One of the things that I've always done is to combine my interest in teaching, research, and service together. And so, and that's how I try to bring some order to, hypothetically order. It's not really there, but to bring some convergence to the life that I lead in the sense that, EFL is my number one target. I I identify funds that support any effort. I identify along those lines, and I identify service that relates to that line. I teach courses, that allow me to do that. And so I try to find that convergence, and I research all of those three together. And so that's one of the ways that you can kind of
Hmm.
create space. I know it's confusing. Grant funding, looking for things to fund your own individual project, your service, the types of courses that you develop, that you can offer based on your own understanding of what you bring to the profession, to the context, and how it fits or does not fit
Hmm.
into what's already there.
Well, and actually, I was
I
very surprised when I heard that you had changed departments, because I honestly thought, once you have your niche, once you
Mhm.
have your area, that's where you were, and you continued that way. It's just, progressing through the ranks and expanding your influence, maybe. Was it difficult to change departments, and is it difficult for you, not just in the sense of Indiana University, but for you as a professional to shift your uh, focus that way?
Mm-hmm. I don't think I've shifted my focus.
Hmm.
What I've done, just based on what I've said earlier, what I've done is to pay. I was looking for new ways to grow,
Hmm.
and I think one of the things, like at my tenure year, I was looking for a certain type of growth, in my thinking,
Mhm.
my associate, I was looking at ESL in Indiana, and then when I post tenure associate professor level, I went abroad. I recontextualized what I understood was happening in Indiana in terms of my research, teaching, and service. I moved it abroad because I was sensing that I could learn something new. It was an opportunity for something new for me to understand about what I was currently doing. And it aligns too with my interests greatly. And so so post tenure, when I was an associate professor, I recontextualized my work internationally. And you saw that I was very involved in China, I was very involved in Turkey, I was very involved in Macedonia, et cetera, et cetera. And now my third stage, I'm a full professor now,
Mhm.
and again, I've always worked with the online medium, the blended medium. But now where we are at this point in time, I'm recontextualizing my work, you know, uh, within the online medium, within the blended hybrid medium. And
Mhm.
so it was an opportunity for me to kind of grow at each phase. And so I saw that, as calling for me to take the next steps. And so I don't know about everybody else, but I think how difficult it is to change departments. I think I went through the steps again, which is, to develop a proposal, to show where I fit into the new department, to have my proposal looked at, evaluated across all levels, to have all the faculty vote, and the deans to vote. And so all those stages, the check and balance process here, I truly believe in it because the vote came out unanimous. It took a while. It took a while, from the stage of proposal development and making sure I did all the needs assessment and all those types of things, and to present it to different people and to have all those things voted. I mean, just like you would as a normal professor, the application process. But, I truly believe in the check and balance process in the system, because it's not a decision of one, it's the decision of all. Same with the tenure process. It's not just the decision of one or two people, it's a decision of many people, different stages. And so, I mean, when the check and balance process uh, works, it works well. And it's very involving, it's very engaging, but that's the process. And thankfully for me, it worked well, and reconfirms my belief in the system.
That's really great. It sounds kind of daunting, but it sounds as if it does work very well when it works.
Yes, it works well when it works. Like if you think about I mean, it's like the dissertation. You can't think about the whole entire process all at once, right? You have to take it step by step. Everything is daunting, but the process I just described, it reflects the system in the United States. The tenure, I mean, in not the United States, it's the Indiana University system of check and balance, the tenure process. The tenure process, it's I don't know, a 7-step process or something like that, because you start with your own sense of self-readiness, then the evaluation of, you go through the stage of your colleagues in the department, and then your chair includes your colleagues, obviously, and then and then you have the school, the evaluation inside school, and then the deans of your school, and then you go to the university level, and then you go to the administrators level at the school, and then the board of trustees. And of course, the most important of all is your 6 to 12 external evaluators that look at your work. There's so many steps that you go through, but it is, I mean, it's daunting to think about it, but at the same time, there are checks and balances. There are many more people making decisions, looking at your work, making assessments. So it's not one person or two persons, but
Mhm.
it's a great number of people. And thus, like I said, when the system works,
Mhm.
it works well. It is daunting to think about, but there is a rationale to that, in a sense that you're spreading the decision so
Mhm.
that you're hoping for some level of objectivity in the process. And so I know it's daunting, but if it works, it works.
That's really interesting. And does your service for TESOL International count toward any, well, does it benefit you as an Indiana University professor, or is that just something you do for personal fulfillment?
Well, at this point in time, as a full professor, I do it because it speaks to something that I truly believe in. But if you're a professor in a research institution, you have three jobs: research, teaching, and service.
Okay,
And
right.
so service is always part of your job. I feel that I have three jobs as a professor, because you have to do all three in this job that you have. You have to demonstrate contributions, of course, at the research and teaching level, but service is right there as well. Um,
And how did you get involved with TESOL International and the teacher educator interest section?
um, I've always been involved with TESOL, I think since graduate school, maybe as soon as I could afford to be a member.
Right.
And so as a graduate student, of course, you could pay graduate level fees, but like I said, as soon as I could be a member, I was. And I think again, I mean, I probably sound like a broken record here, but my involvement in TESOL, again, reflects the realities of my job, I think, and of my interest as well. I think at the very beginning, I got quickly involved with the standards task force, which was creating standards for the profession in various areas, because I wanted to have a macro understanding of the job that I was getting into. And the other is that there were people on the task force whose work I've read that I was very curious about, that I wanted to know more about. And so that I think that was the impetus for my initial involvement. The other was, and then I got heavily involved for a couple of years with the accreditation, service work, primarily because, the job here, I was trying to kind of get information so that I could feed it into our own program as we sought accreditation at that point in time in the other department that I was in. And so now I think my involvement in the teacher educator group is because I've been in this profession long enough to know that 80% of English language teachers are non-native speakers. But publications in the field does not reflect that prevalence. And then I think I've been in the profession long enough too, whereby, there are people writing about the context that I was in. And I wanted to kind of connect with international educators, and celebrate and find opportunities to showcase and celebrate their research and practice in their context, and to kind of, so that's why I've been involved, with the teacher educator group, because it creates that opportunity for me to showcase and to engage in the voices of people doing research and teaching in the context from which, in their respective contexts, and thus the webinar series that you mentioned. And
Right.
so again, it goes back to my engagement in TESOL is reflective of what I was engaged in, both at the interest level and the professional level.
Oh, wow. Well, I know you're doing a fantastic job as the facilitator for, the emails I'm getting are any indication of it. Now I've got two more questions because I know we're running a little short on time. I was just curious. Malaysia is one of my favorite places in the world. So I'm wondering, what do you miss about Malaysia?
Oh, Malaysia is my favorite places in the one of my favorite places in the world too, no doubt. Yeah, I think, Lindsay, like you, as an international, I think you obviously miss family and friends. But as an international, one of the things that's you're always in this third space. And
Mm,
so, when I'm in the US, I worry about not being able to be in Malaysia,
mm.
when I'm most needed. Likewise, when I'm in Malaysia, I worry about not being able to be there with family and friends in the US when they most need me. And so that's always the challenge.
Oh yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I think most of our audience definitely can relate to that. That resonates.
Mhm.
And then my final question that I like to ask our interviewees, what is the best advice you've ever gotten?
That's advice. Well, I'll tell you two things. One, the best advice I've ever gotten was from one of my mentors, Larry Mikulewski, who was the former chair of this department. He said to me just the last time I talked to him was, uh, under promise and over deliver. I
That's
thought that was great.
fantastic advice.
Because I was involved. I was about to take on a project, and I said, "Well, you've been there before. What are the things?" Oh, he says, under promise, over deliver, and I think he's got something there. I think the other advice is more of a counter advice. When I started the job here, one of the things that people said was, um, you have research, teaching, and service. Choose one of those lines to argue for your tenure lines. And I went against that advice primarily because the where I was and the job that I was doing, the grant funding I was doing, was allowed with, when I looked at what was happening, um, I was doing research, I was teaching, I was doing service and all of that. And so contrary to the advice, I decided to combine all three, as my tenure case. And it's like, it's against the advice because the challenge is that you have to excel in all three. And so, but I was doing the work, I felt, and that speaks of my case. It's like writing a paper, right? What is your argument? This is my argument, and the next thing you have to do is to prove, to demonstrate that to provide the support for the argument that you're making. And so in essence, I just mentioned to you earlier how I approached it, and so that was my tenure case. That was my argument. I'm doing all three work, and I'll show you how the best that I can, how I did that, excelled in all three. And so in essence, if you look at my work, contrary to people who would focus only on research, the types of publication, and my publications are different because it also reflects, you know, the service and the teaching that I do, and I supported my my tenure argument, also in the sense of how I excelled in teaching and how I excelled in service. And so in essence, I think, the advice that I took for myself was that you take ownership of your job, and demonstrate, how you see yourself in the job. Again, this is the delicate balance between autonomy and the joy of autonomy, but the huge responsibility that comes with it. That's the balance, and it's not an easy balance, but at least you have that space to make that decision.
Well, that's very, it's mind blowing. I think you've given us all a lot to think about. Even those of us who are not currently in a position where it could possibly ever lead to tenure track, but are eyeing other opportunities. So thank you.
I'll just say, Lindsay, I know you're, it's steps, like there's a Chinese saying, and the reason I'm using this is because I did some work in China, and people were always telling me this. In China they have such, and I'm sure in Korea too, but these proverbs are incredible. They said, one of the things that I always remember is that you cross the river, you know, uh, by uh, hanging on to little pebbles. You reach for the little pebbles or little things that you can step on one at a time. So, and I think this is what it is. It's like step by step, you reach for pebbles. And our discussion today is perhaps one small pebble, that we reach for, that somebody has left for us, perhaps, and then that's what we're always crossing rivers that we don't know the end point, but we know that there are pebbles in the sand that we could reach for. And so, it's like writing a dissertation, like I said earlier, it doesn't all come all at once, but it comes in small steps, and perhaps one of the things I think my last word is create those steps for you, those rungs in the ladder for yourself, because if nothing else, in academia, no one provides you those rungs. You have to create those for yourself. And that's what I've learned in this context.
That's fantastic. I'm inspired. I think that's a very helpful discussion. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule with all the steps ahead that you're creating for yourself, especially. But we really, really appreciate it. And I, for one, am taking heart in everything that you've said tonight. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Hope it's helpful.
And thanks to everybody who's watching this. We'll see you again for another AMA someday, I hope.